Okay, so off we go. Welcome everybody to the last session of the second day of the BAPT conference. I'm really pleased to welcome Brian Lawrence. First time Brian has spoken at the British Association for Psychological Type Conference. Brian is doing a fantastic job for us because he's in New Zealand and it's 7 o'clock in the morning. So he's had to be up very early this morning. So I'm already feeling grateful to him for that. Brian is the director of Life Trails Consulting. He's a facilitator and coach. He's an MBTI master practitioner and an EQI master trainer too. And he's got this fascinating topic. So we're going to be dancing with our inner wolves. So I'm really looking forward to this. So over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Catherine. And again, thank you for the invitation to present today. So I ran this presentation last year at BAPT, and since then it's evolved a little, and I'm currently running a longer session with a group across the world. So I'll talk about that a little later in the presentation. But welcome to Dancing with Your Inner Wolves. So if you're curious, your curiosity will be satisfied in a minute. But before I start, and I do this at every program, I start with a little poem, a little prayer, a little meditation. So I have a Native American prayer here, and I thought it was quite appropriate for a type presentation. So walk as tall as the trees, live as strong as the mountains, be gentle as the spring winds, keep the warmth of the summer sun in your heart, and the Great Spirit will always be with you. And I do a different one for different presentations, so I thought this was a nice one to start off with. So I want to introduce myself, but I want to introduce myself in a different way, using all of the categories and the labels that I use to describe myself. So this is a very INTP way of describing myself. So these are all the things that I identify myself to be. They're different parts of me. They're expressed differently at different times and in different spaces, but they're all still a very unique part of me. And together they make up the person who is me. And I would venture to say that there's no one else out there who is exactly like me with the experiences that I had over my lifetime. And you can say the same thing about yourself. You're unique. You're a combination of all of these expressions of yourself, and each of those categories describes a part of me. But they are only one way to describe me. They're not all of me. They're a segue into what we're going to be exploring and playing with in today's session. So I want to invite you to do the same thing. So in the chat, if you could, I'd like you to introduce yourself and use as many categories, descriptions, labels that you can think of that would describe yourself. So go ahead and do that now. Mother, author, coach, tennis player, gardener, thinker, analyzer, friend. Thank you, Catherine. Husband and dog, history lover, author, book, partner, sister, daughter, Irish dancer. Catherine, I didn't know about that. Wow. Public speaker, MBTI specialist, world traveler, German citizen, visionary, lecturer, trainer, father, husband, friend, L&D professional. Isn't it amazing the sorts of things that we learn about each other when we start using all of these categories. Father, husband, previous young widow, juggler. Now that's interesting. Figure skater. Oh, Claire, like happy spirit. Okay, so if no one, oh, okay, we've got more. Veranda sitter, magician, gardener, reader, walker, teacher, tutor, fairy charmer. Murder mystery lover, MBTI lover, traveler, singer. Wouldn't it be fascinating if the first time we met someone, we said to them, give me 30 words that describe you, or tell me 5 things about you that would surprise someone else. In any case, if anyone's wondering about Dungeon Master that I put at the bottom of my character, it's not anything weird. I just play Dungeons and Dragons every Sunday night. Okay, let's move on. You can continue to put your descriptions down, and I'll carry on. So you've probably heard of the Cherokee proverb of the 2 wolves. The proverb suggests that we have 2 wolves in our hearts. So one represents the good side and manifests qualities like joy and peace and love, hope, serenity, humility, compassion, empathy. And the other wolf represents our evil side, manifested by anger and envy and hate and sorrow and arrogance, lies, superiority, and ego. Now, which one gets expressed typically? It's the one that you feed most. So I've been using this metaphor for some years now when talking about type in my MBTI certification programs, when looking at dichotomies, polarities, opposites. So in 2020, when everything went downhill around the world and I didn't have any work coming in, and I had a lot of time to just sit and think, as an INTP does, I started to contemplate this proverb. So I started overlaying this proverb with the idea of personality and Jungian theory. And I thought, well, what if we had not just 2 wolves in us, but more? What about 4 or 8? It sounds like a very crowded mind, but then our capacity for thought is infinite, isn't it? So does anyone remember this TV show from the 90s? It's about a guy named Herman who had 4 little people living in his head. They expressed his personality in very different ways. Does anyone remember it? Put a yes in the chat if you do. So no one watched this. So each of the 4 little people represented different aspects of his personality, and they often had arguments with each other. But at the end of the day, or the end of the episode, they all wound up getting along quite nicely. So if you look at Jung's theory of personality, we have 8 functions or aspects of ourselves that potentially are expressed through our personality, through our behavior. I was an MBTI accreditation trainer for about 11 years, and I trained people in Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And although it was a very comprehensive program, I felt that it just didn't do the core of Jung's theory a lot of justice. So we spent maybe half a day at best talking about type dynamics, talking about development, talking about stress, and we gave people a formula to work out the first four functions, so the dominant, the auxiliary, the tertiary, and the inferior. We did a couple of exercises to help people understand their dominant function, and then we were done. So for the most part, people got it, though not many would be confident enough to then reteach this material later on. And very few trainers that I know of actually ever talk about type dynamics ever again in corporate workshops, for example, and MBTI training sessions, which is a pity because we're really delving into the depth of Jung's theory. So I wanted to create a program, and I've wanted to do this for years, to really teach the core of the theory in an easy way to learn, way to learn developing type to MBTI practitioners, who could in turn teach it to the everyday person in a workshop. So in thinking about the two wolves proverb and delving into Jung and then John Beebe's work, the work done by Gary and Margaret Hartzler and Dario Nardi and Mark Hunzinger, I devised a framework based around the 8 cognitive functions, which all of you should be intimately familiar with. So all of you probably know all this now, but this is how I typically introduce it to people who don't know a lot about type. So talking about the core of the theory, so 2 things that our brains do with information: gathering information and deciding on information. And Jung's model of personality theory is responsible for gathering or taking in information from the world around us, and then it makes judgments or decisions based on that information. So his model of personality is based on 2 ways of gathering information, so sensing and intuition, and 2 ways of deciding on information, thinking and feeling. Which gives us the first 4 wolves: the sensing wolf, the intuitive wolf, the thinking wolf, and the feeling wolf. And you can have a number of characteristics of each of these ways of being. But we're not done yet. So there's another dimension to look at. So there's also the orientation of energy with with introversion and extroversion. So how we receive and use energy. And we call this dichotomy extroversion and introversion. So introversion tends to be drawn to the inner world, works ideas by reflecting on them, focuses in depth on a few passionate interests, tends to be private and contained. The extroverted wolf is drawn to the outer world, so working out ideas by talking them through, having relatively broad interests, tending to be more sociable and expressive. So you then have the 8 wolves. So you have this dichotomy across the 4 wolves, and together with the expression of energy, you can have 8 distinct wolves. So what I've done is named each of these wolves. So the names are kind of fluid at the moment. I'm still working on whether or not they fit. Some people have said, no, that doesn't quite describe me, but that's what we're going with now. And that's how I've used them to describe it in the program that I run. So the traditionalist, the mystic, the analyst, the healer, the scout, the explorer, the commander, and the unifier. The names are based on the most dominant function of each of the wolves, what I call the hero. And the hero is the most dominant aspect of our personality, of our waking personality, our conscious personality. For example, with the traditionalist, introverted sensing is the most dominant aspect. With the unifier, extroverted feeling is most dominant. There is an easy formula for working it out. We teach that on the program, but it's not absolutely necessary to know it in this program. So I do run a session on what I call the wolf pack, and looking at the hierarchy of all 8 of them. So the important thing to remember, and this is what I convey to my groups, is that we have access to all 8 of them. not in equal amounts. And what they do is they form part of our personality matrix. And, you know, or as author and analyst Jim Johnston puts it, it's part of your indispensable compass. And I believe Jim did a session today, didn't he, Catherine?
Yes, yesterday actually for us. Yeah, he did a keynote session on, and as you said, it's Jung's indispensable compass. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'd like you to do now, if you haven't already done so, and if you have done I don't know if everyone's done the assessment. Catherine, you would have had the assessment out ages ago. If you have done the assessment, could you put your scores down for each of your wolves on the chat?
So just for information, the assessment was posted on the agenda for the conference as a link for people to do if they wanted to. You may find, Brian, that people haven't done it, which is no disrespect to you. And typically people tend not to have done the pre-reading, I would say, in most cases. Maybe I'm maligning people here, I'm not sure.
If you haven't done it, that's fine. I'll give you a couple of seconds. If you have, put the scores down. And at some point after this presentation, if you want to go and do the assessment, I've recently revised it down to about 64 questions. It was 72. And I'm not claiming any validity or reliability around it. It's something that I put together based on a number of different questions. So if you haven't, that's fine. I would be interested to know if you already know what your dominant function is, what your hero is. If you put down your hero based on what you understand of your personality type, what I have noticed, however, is that when people have done the assessment, there tends to be a correlation with their highest score and their dominant function. The other 8, not so much. So what I call the companion or the auxiliary doesn't necessarily always match up with their second highest score. The tertiary doesn't always match up with their third highest and so on, but their dominant seems to. But all that means is that they may have developed the other wolves or the other functions in a very different way. Now, what I'd also like you to do is put down what you think might be your weakest wolf. What the one you have the least access to. To unify and scout, yep. So Catherine, your healer would be your demon, wouldn't you? Wouldn't it? The 8th function. Yeah. Both Catherines. And I'm married to a healer.
And as you know, Brian, my sister is a healer.
Of course, yeah, Elizabeth is a healer. Okay, let's move on. So think about, for your strongest wolf, what are its specific strengths and what are its blind spots? So if you put down some of the strengths of your healer, of your hero in the chat, and the blind spots that you might have for your hero as well. So as an analyst, these are mine. And what I've also done is I've gotten an artist from Bulgaria to render each of the wolves as a fantasy character wolf. If anyone knows Critical Role or the animated series Vox Machina, my analyst wolf is based on Percy DeVolo. So Catherine, you're nodding. So I saw Percy as a very typical INTP. So she's taken each of the wolves. We're only up to 3 at the moment. She's working through each of them. But we've got the explorer, we've got the analyst, and we've got the commander. So Paul, blind spots, not understanding why others don't see what is so obvious. So true of INTJs. Not being comfortable when there's no explanation, absolutely. Seeing into the future, working out criteria for decisions, yep. Okay, so that's my hero. That's that's some of yours as well. So remember, also within us, open for us to use, are the 7 other wolves. So together, they represent the totality of your personality. The level of energy of the other 7 may not be at the same level of the hero, but they're there and they do influence how we deal with the world. So many people rely primarily on the hero to deal with the world in most circumstances. Some people rely only on their hero, but this may not be the healthiest or most useful thing to do because it's only one way of looking at and dealing with the world. So imagine your mind as a toolbox, and the only tool you ever take out to use is a hammer. Every problem starts looking like a nail. And this might be looked at as a demonstration of Einstein's definition of insanity. So doubling down on solving a problem with the same sort of thinking that hasn't actually been working. So when your only tool is a hammer, every problem is treated like a nail. Imagine the analytical wolf using its supreme logic to solve every problem it comes across. So what could go wrong? So he or she comes across a problem, applies logic, and it doesn't work. Well, that didn't work. Maybe it needs more logic, which tends to create an even bigger problem. So if you're a thinking wolf, you need to remember logic doesn't always work in every situation, especially where people are concerned. This is why we have the rest of the wolf pack. So that's exactly why the rest of the pack is there, for us to access different ways of understanding people and using different ways to relate to them. So one of the biggest misunderstandings about type, which I found, which I see, is that we're put into a box. That's how we are, that's how we will act. But the truth is we put ourselves into boxes because that's where we're comfortable. To use a different analogy, and we use this on the MBTI program, think of your hero as a room in a house with 8 rooms. Your hero just happens to be where you get the most energy, where you're the most comfortable, and there's no reason why you can't walk out of that room to visit and interact with the other 7 wolves. Think of all of those 8 wolves interacting with each other like the characters in Herman's head. Sometimes there are conflicts, but if you train them to dance with each other, imagine what could happen. Imagine how you could really relate to the world that way. To give you an example of this, I once was exploring working with a government organization in Singapore to do some team development. And I asked one of the directors, how do you motivate your staff? He said, well, we shout at them. I'm not kidding. And I said, well, how's that working for you? And he said, well, it doesn't. So I said, okay, what do you do instead? He said, we shout louder. So basically what he was doing was he had preferences for ENTJ, and he was using his extroverted thinking, his commander hero. And then when it didn't work, he just doubled down on it. So, okay, I haven't shouted loud enough, so I'm going to really put the fear of God into you now. And of course, people started to leave. And then he applied even more logic. Well, if they leave, well, we've got 20 other people waiting for this job. Well, while not factoring in the fact that you had to spend a lot more money training the next new person to come into it. So without really accessing the rest of his pack, he became quite one-sided at expressing his personality. So essentially what we need to do is become a whole human being. So in my favorite movie of all time, and it's not Star Wars, as some people might think it is, it's Dances with Wolves. So there's a pivotal scene where Kevin Costner's character realizes that his assimilation into the Sioux tribe is an essential part of his hero's journey. Kicking Bird, the medicine man, says to him, there are many trails in this life, and the one that matters most is a trail of a true human being. I believe you're on this trail, and it is a good thing. So that hero's journey is a term coined by Joseph Campbell, but it has its roots in Jungian theory. It's our personal journey of exploration. There is struggle, there is hardship, but there's also knowledge gained, there's friendships made and unmade, there's experiences created, you rumble through it, you fumble through it, and if you come out at the end of it, hopefully a whole human being. So Stealing Fire from the Gods by Jane Bonnet talks about a golden paradigm patterns in all great stories. So every great epic is based on a hero's journey. So Star Wars, Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, The Wheel of Time. So too, our lives is a hero's journey, a path to wholeness. Not everyone takes this journey. So the vast majority of humanity is content to sit around in Hobbiton or Tatooine or Kansas and never ventures forth to discover who they truly can be. And some of us spend their entire lives on this journey, and it really is a lifetime's exploration. I believe that the path to discovering this, what I call our true trail, must involve discovering and developing our 8 wolves. So it's a journey into ourselves. It's the basis of self-leadership. And until we discover who we are, how can we ever hope to lead anyone else? So self-awareness is necessary for self-development. So before we can become whole, we have to meet these 8 wolves. So once we start to develop ourselves, we can start to improve the way we relate to ourselves, the people around us, to understand how we learn, how we lead, how we deal with change, how we deal with stress. So looking at self-development is the journey to creating wholeness. It's our first step in discovering what our true trail in life is and how we then become a whole human being. So it's our first step on the path to individuation. For so many people, they'll only ever know their hero, and that's a pity. They may only ever use their hero So if you truly want to be a true human being, a whole human being, find your true trail in life, you need to be able to dance with all of the wolves within you. So which wolf would you most like to develop and why? So if you want to put that in the chat, which wolf would you like to really develop and why would you like to develop it? It may also be the wolf that we're most afraid to explore.
Brian, I'm just wondering if it's worth going back to your slide with the diagram with all the wolves on and the labels. I don't know if that confuses
Yeah,
things.
we could do that. That one?
That one, yeah, thanks.
Isabel, you say scout because I sometimes feel like I'm missing the now. So true. In starting my own business in the last few years, I've had to explore my traditionalist and start to make lists and start to explore how to do accounts. And it's been a fascinating journey. I hated delving into detail, and now it's becoming more comfortable. Unify to bring people together, scout to get more in touch with details and context and staying grounded. Explorer, Marianne. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. So now the key feature of the mastery program that I run is it's simple, it's easy to carry out. There's a series of fun activities and tasks to develop skills in each of the wolves. So each week, participants learn about each wolf and then pick and complete activities to develop their chosen wolf. So some of these are derived from activities in the work of Gary and Margaret Hartzler, some from my own work on type with my pocket personality cards, some from various books written on type. So in the virtual Inner Wolf Mastery program, it's a 10-week program, and each week people explore a different wolf. So participants have the opportunity to choose specific activity cards depending on the wolf they want to develop. So I've differentiated the cards as well at 3 levels. So 1 would be the easiest level, so the easier activities, and then 3, they start to get more complex. And we do the entire program on Miro whiteboarding software. So what I want to do is share my screen. I'll stop the share of the slides and I'll share Miro for a second. And I'll show you how we do this. Might just take a while to come up. So there's a whole series of activity cards, and I'll zoom in on the commander. So basically, people turn over the cards. They pick out an activity. Can everyone see the detail? Can you read it?
I can read it, but I've got quite a big screen. I suppose it depends on what sort of screen. What can other people read it?
Can everyone read the? Okay,
yeah.
Great. So for example, that's one of the commander cards. We'll zoom out. We'll go to the Explorer. So this is one of the activities for the Explorer. Few people have indicated Scout. So pull out one of the Scout cards. We did this particular activity at a type interest group meeting, and people were getting down on the carpet and sort of looking at what was on their carpet. So there's some really interesting activities there, and I've put Catherine, if you want to share that link to the coaching cards, I put a link to some sample cards that you can download now, and we can try those out. So what I'd like you to do, I wonder if we've got enough to do a quick breakout session.
Yeah, so I've posted the 2 links in the chat. I'm not sure which is the one you particularly want them to download now.
The first one, I think.
The first.
Is it the second?
The first one was the first one you gave me, and the second one is the second
That's
one.
the coaching cards, yeah. So the first one was the coaching cards.
So it's the first one you want them to download?
Yeah.
For now, right.
Yeah, so if we download that, now when you get that link, look for the particular wolf that you want to develop and pick out a card from there, and do time for a breakout session.
Yeah, well, we've got 18 minutes. I think that's time.
Okay.
People, we could put quite small, groups of 3 maybe.
Yeah. So pick out the wolf that you want to pick out, a card that fascinates you, pick an activity from that card, and if you can carry it out, carry it out. If you can't, think about the activity itself and how you would actually carry out that activity. Because some of them involve you going to a restaurant, some of you involve, it involves playing a game or driving a car, things like that. So let's have a little discussion about the activity that you pick.
Okay, so we're coming up towards the hour. Brian, are there any other slides you wanted to share to finish off with?
No, that's the last one. I just wanted to share my email address on the screen. So if anyone wants to get in touch about the Mastery program that I run, or about the cards, or just to have a chat about the program, drop me an email. I'm delighted to talk about them. So I've been working on them for the last couple of years, and it's still a work in progress, but it's getting there.
I have to say, so I'm going to thank you, Brian, for this session. I have absolutely loved it. I love the wolves, and I love the way you've used the metaphor, having the rest of the wolf pack to help you, and picking on which wolf do you need to develop. It doesn't have to be your eighth function, you know, it could be one of the others, depending. I've just loved the way that you've used all of those metaphors and those images. It's been wonderful for me. I've really enjoyed the session. And I can see people nodding, so they must have too. We need to, I did check in the break, your assessment isn't on the website, for which I apologize. However, we can get it up for tomorrow. So Brian, if you could stay on at the end, I'll just make sure I've got all the right links that I need for the stuff that you'd like to go up on the website. But and yeah, I'm sure people would like to take the assessment and see how their wolves compare with what they normally understand their type is. Cool. So does anybody, any other final comments from anyone? Yeah, sorry, Brian, go on.
No, I was saying thank you everyone for showing up and playing full out.
Yeah, and see you all tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I think I'm still recording. I'll just stop.